A forgotten trainee song resurfaces on stage, and Jungkook breaks down as Jimin sings, revealing a decade-old secret hidden behind their silent gazes. The first note wasn't supposed to exist. Jimin's voice slipped into the dark arena before the lights fully rose, soft and trembling, a melody so old that only two people in the world recognized it immediately. Jungkook froze. Thousands of fans were screaming, cameras flashing like lightning across the stadium, yet to him the noise vanished. All he heard was that song, the one that had never been recorded, never performed, never spoken about again. The song they wrote when they were just trainees. And Jimin was singing it now. Jungkook's breath caught painfully in his chest as the second verse began. His fingers tightened around the microphone until his knuckles whitened. For 10 years, he had buried that melody somewhere deep inside himself, like a memory too fragile to touch. But Jimin remembered every word. The stage lights flared to life, illuminating Jimin standing alone at the center of the stage. His expression was calm, almost gentle, yet his eyes searched the stage until they found Jungkook. For a moment, the entire world narrowed into that gaze. 10 years of silence passed between them in a single heartbeat. And Jungkook felt tears burn his eyes. Back when they were trainees, the practice rooms smelled like sweat and cheap instant noodles. The fluorescent lights buzzed constantly, and the mirrors reflected boys who were too young to carry the weight of dreams that big. Jungkook had been 15, quiet and shy, always practicing long after everyone else had gone back to the dorms. Jimin had been the opposite, warm laughter, relentless determination, and a habit of humming melodies under his breath whenever he thought nobody was listening. One rainy night, Jungkook had found him sitting on the floor of the empty practice room. Jimin was writing lyrics in a small notebook. "What's that?" Jungkook asked hesitantly. Jimin looked up with a surprised smile. "A song." "For who?" "For us," Jimin said. That night, they wrote the song together. It was clumsy and imperfect, but it carried something real, two teenagers trying to capture the loneliness of chasing a dream in a city that never slowed down. They promised each other something simple. Someday, when they finally stood on a real stage, they would sing it together. But promises made by trainees are fragile things. The memory fractured 2 months later. Their schedules became brutal, evaluations harsher. Rumors started spreading inside the company that not everyone would debut. Pressure twisted friendships into quiet competition. And then the night came when Jungkook overheard something he was never meant to hear. Two managers talking in the hallway. The company only needs one main vocalist. The younger one has more potential. Jimin might not make the final lineup. The words carved themselves into Jungkook's mind like glass. That night, he avoided Jimin completely. The next morning, he told him something cruel. "We should stop working on that song," Jungkook said without meeting his eyes. Jimin looked confused. "Why?" "It's childish," Jungkook muttered. "We're not kids anymore." The silence that followed was unbearable. Jimin nodded slowly, though disappointment flickered across his face. "Okay," he said quietly. He never asked about the song again. Months later, they debuted together anyway. But by then, the distance between them had already formed, thin, invisible, impossible to explain. Years passed in a blur of performances, interviews, world tour, and endless cameras. They laughed together on stage, joked during broadcasts, supported each other through exhaustion. But that song stayed buried. Jungkook kept the crumpled lyrics sheet hidden in a box inside his closet. He never told Jimin the truth. He had pushed Jimin away because he was terrified. Terrified that if only one of them debuted, he wanted it to be Jimin. So he had tried to destroy the promise before the company could destroy them. Standing on the stage now, 10 years later, Jungkook realized something slowly, painfully. Jimin had known. As the song reached the chorus, Jimin's voice softened. The lyrics were exactly the same as they had written that rainy night, even the awkward lines Jungkook had insisted on keeping. Jimin turned slightly, his gaze steady. And he smiled. The smile wasn't bitter. It wasn't sad. It was understanding. When the chorus ended, Jungkook finally moved. His voice trembled as he lifted his microphone and joined the melody instinctively, the words returning to him like something alive. The crowd erupted in confused excitement, sensing something rare unfolding in front of them. But the moment belonged only to the two of them. As they sang together, memories poured through Jungkook, the old practice room, the rain tapping the windows, the smell of instant noodles, Jimin laughing when Jungkook sang a wrong note. His tears finally fell. Jimin noticed immediately. Of course he did. After the final line faded, the arena fell strangely quiet for a second before the audience exploded into cheers. Jungkook lowered his head, wiping his face quickly. But Jimin stepped closer. He spoke softly into his microphone, though his eyes remained fixed on Jungkook. "This is a song we wrote when we were trainees," he said. "It was never meant to be performed, but some promises wait a long time." The crowd roared again. Jungkook looked up, his voice barely steady. "Why now?" he asked quietly. Jimin's answer was gentle. "Because you kept the lyrics." Jungkook's heart skipped. Jimin tilted his head slightly, a familiar gesture from their trainee days. "You thought I didn't know," he said. Jungkook stared at him in shock. Jimin chuckled softly. "You were terrible at lying back then." The tension that had existed between them for a decade finally cracked open. Jungkook laughed through his tears. "I thought you hated me for stopping the song." "I knew why you did it," Jimin replied. The stadium lights shimmered across the sea of fans, but suddenly the massive stage felt like the tiny practice room they once shared. "You were trying to protect me," Jimin said. Jungkook shook his head weakly. "I was just scared." Jimin placed a hand briefly on Jungkook's shoulder. "We were both scared." For a moment they simply stood there, breathing in the noise of the crowd and the weight of 10 unspoken years finally dissolving. The past hadn't disappeared, but it had finally been spoken aloud through music. Jungkook looked at Jimin again, feeling lighter than he had in years. "You remembered every word," he said. Jimin grinned. "You wrote half of them." The band behind them prepared for the next song, the concert continuing as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But something quiet and important had shifted. The secret that once lived only between two nervous trainees had finally reached the world through a single melody. And somehow, instead of breaking them, it made their bond stronger. When the next song began, Jungkook leaned closer and murmured something only Jimin could hear. "Next time," he said, smiling, "we write a better one." Jimin laughed, bright and unguarded, just like he had 10 years ago. "Deal." The arena lights dimmed again, but the atmosphere had changed. Something fragile had been exposed in front of 70,000 people, and the air backstage buzzed with whispers even before the members finished the next performance. Jungkook could feel it in the way the staff looked at them, in the way the other members exchanged glances that were half curious, half amused. When the final song ended and the curtain dropped, the roar of the crowd faded behind the thick backstage walls. The moment they stepped off stage, the tension snapped. "What was that?" Taehyung asked first, pulling his in-ear monitor out while staring between Jungkook and Jimin. His voice wasn't angry, but it was sharp with curiosity. Jimin wiped sweat from his forehead, breathing heavily. "A song." "No," Namjoon said calmly, though his eyes were intense. "That wasn't just a song." Jungkook avoided everyone's gaze and reached for a bottle of water. His hands were still shaking. Yoongi leaned against a table with his arms crossed. You two looked like you were about to cry on stage. Jungkook muttered under his breath, I did cry. Hosok let out a soft laugh. Yeah, we noticed. Silence hung in the room for a moment. Then Taehyung smirked. Okay, seriously, what secret have you been hiding for 10 years? Jungkook opened his mouth, but no words came out. Jimin answered instead. We wrote it when we were trainees, he said simply. That part we heard, Jin replied, but the way you two looked at each other, that's not just a trainee memory. Jungkook finally looked up. The adrenaline from the performance was fading, leaving something raw in its place. It was supposed to be forgotten, he said quietly. Namjoon studied him carefully, but it was. No, Jimin said. The door to the hallway burst open suddenly as a staff member rushed in, holding a phone. Have you seen this? She asked breathlessly. She turned the screen toward them. The clip had already gone viral. Fans had recorded the entire moment. Jimin singing the mysterious song, Jungkook freezing, the tears, the way their voices blended in the chorus. The comments were scrolling faster than anyone could read. What song is that? Why is Jungkook crying? This feels like a secret. The way they looked at each other. Taehyung whistled. Well, he said, the internet is having a meltdown. Hosok leaned over the phone. Oh wow, he murmured, they're already calling it the trainee song. Jungkook ran a hand through his damp hair. This wasn't supposed to happen, he muttered. Jimin tilted his head. You say that like it's a disaster. It might be, Jungkook replied. Yoongi raised an eyebrow. Why? Jungkook hesitated. Because the song carried more than just memories. It carried the truth about that night. And if the story ever fully surfaced, people might start asking questions about the company, about the trainee system, about the pressure that nearly broke them before they even debuted. But that wasn't the part that scared Jungkook the most. What scared him was the possibility that fans would start dissecting every glance, every moment between him and Jimin over the past decade. The door opened again. This time it was their manager. He didn't look angry. He looked worried. We need to talk, he said. The room immediately went quiet. They followed him down a long hallway into a small meeting room. The hum of air conditioning filled the silence as everyone sat down. The manager placed his tablet on the table. The screen showed trending topics. Their names dominated the list. But one phrase stood out. Jimin, Jungkook secret song. Another tag was rising rapidly. 10-year promise. The manager sighed. The company wants to know why this song was performed without prior discussion. Jungkook felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Jimin spoke calmly. It was spontaneous. Yoongi snorted quietly. Spontaneous, that song sounded rehearsed. Jimin glanced at him. I remember things very well, he said. The manager rubbed his temples. Listen carefully, he said. Fans are already building theories. Some of them are harmless, some of them not so much. He tapped the screen again. A fan video played. It zoomed in on the moment their eyes met during the chorus. The slow-motion clip made the moment look even more intense. Taehyung leaned back in his chair. Okay, he admitted, that does look suspicious. Jungkook groaned softly. Jimin didn't look embarrassed. He looked thoughtful. Let them wonder, he said quietly. Everyone turned to him. Namjoon spoke first. You're surprisingly calm about this. Jimin shrugged slightly. We didn't do anything wrong. The manager looked unconvinced. You revealed a personal moment from before debut in front of millions of viewers. Yes, Jimin said. And Yoongi asked, watching him carefully. Jimin leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. There's something everyone forgets about trainees, he said slowly. They see the success, the fame, the concerts. They forget what it was like before all that. Jungkook watched him silently. Jimin continued. They forget how many nights we thought we wouldn't make it, how many people disappeared from the practice rooms, how many friendships were destroyed by competition. The room grew quiet again. Namjoon nodded slowly. That's true. Jimin looked at Jungkook. And sometimes, he said gently, people carry guilt for things that were never their fault. Jungkook swallowed. The manager studied both of them carefully. Is there something you two haven't told us? Before anyone could answer, a loud voice came from the hallway. Breaking news. A staff member burst into the room, breathless. You need to see this. He turned his laptop toward them. A live broadcast from an entertainment news channel was playing. The headline flashed across the screen. Former trainee claims secret behind BTS trainee song. The broadcast cut to an interview. A familiar face appeared. Jungkook felt the blood drain from his face. The man on the screen had been a trainee with them years ago. Someone who had left the company just months before their debut. He was smiling faintly as the interviewer asked him a question. Do you recognize the song performed by Jimin tonight? Yes, the former trainee said calmly, I do. The room felt suddenly colder. What can you tell us about it? The interviewer asked. The man leaned back in his chair. That song wasn't just written by Jimin and Jungkook. Jungkook's heart started pounding. There were 3 of us. The interviewer looked surprised. 3? Yes, the man said quietly, and one of us was forced to leave before debut. The room exploded with overlapping voices. What? Wait. Is he serious? Jungkook couldn't breathe. Because the man on the screen was telling the truth. And the secret they had buried for 10 years was about to be dragged into the light. The room fell into a silence so heavy that even the hum of the air conditioner sounded loud. No one spoke. The broadcast continued playing on the laptop screen, the former trainee's face illuminated under studio lights, calm and almost unsettlingly composed. Jungkook felt like someone had opened a door to a memory he had spent years trying to lock away. Taehyung was the first to react. Wait, he said slowly, leaning forward, 3 of you. The interviewer on the screen nodded eagerly. So you're saying the song we heard tonight wasn't written only by Jimin and Jungkook? The man smiled faintly. That's right. His name was Kang Min-seok. The name alone was enough to make Jungkook's stomach twist. Min-seok continued speaking in a voice that sounded almost nostalgic. We used to stay late in the practice room together. Jimin, Jungkook, and me. Everyone else would go back to the dorms, but we kept working. The interviewer leaned closer. So the song was written by all 3 of you. Min-seok shrugged. I wrote the first verse. Jungkook suddenly stood up so quickly that his chair scraped loudly against the floor. That's not true. Everyone in the room looked at him. Namjoon frowned, Jungkook. But Jungkook wasn't looking at them. He was staring at the screen. His voice came out tight. He didn't write the first verse. Jimin remained very still. The broadcast continued. Why didn't you perform it with them tonight? The interviewer asked. Min-seok chuckled softly. Well, that's a complicated story. The camera zoomed slightly closer. I didn't leave the company voluntarily. The tension in the room thickened instantly. Yoongi muttered under his breath, "Of course." The interviewer tilted her head. "Are you suggesting you were forced out?" Minseok didn't answer directly. Instead, he said something that made Jungkook's heart drop. "I guess you could say someone made sure there was only room for two people." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Taehyung sat up straight. What the hell is he implying? Jin looked between Jungkook and Jimin. "You two know what he's talking about, don't you?" Jungkook's chest felt tight. Memories were crashing into him too fast. The practice room. The late nights. Minseok's laugh echoing through the mirrors. And the argument. The one night that changed everything. Jimin finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "He's twisting the story." The manager looked tense. "Can you explain what actually happened?" Jimin didn't answer immediately. On the screen, Minseok leaned forward toward the interviewer. "You know," he said casually, "people always talk about how close those two are." He smiled slowly. But back then, things weren't so simple. The interviewer blinked. "What do you mean?" Minseok's eyes glinted. "I mean, there was a lot of tension between us." Jungkook's fists tightened. Taehyung noticed. "Hey," he said quietly, "breathe." But Jungkook barely heard him. Because Minseok was still talking. "There was competition," he said. "Everyone wanted the debut spot." "That's normal in the trainee system," the interviewer said. "Yes," Minseok replied smoothly, "but sometimes competition gets personal." The implication landed like a spark in gasoline. The manager slammed the laptop shut. "That's enough." But the damage was already done. Hosok rubbed the back of his neck. "Wow," he murmured, "he's basically accusing you guys of sabotaging him." Yoongi scoffed. "He's doing it carefully, not directly enough to get sued." Namjoon turned to Jungkook. "What actually happened with him?" Jungkook's throat felt dry. He hadn't talked about that night in years. Jimin watched him quietly. "Tell them," Jimin said softly. Jungkook looked at him. "You're sure?" Jimin nodded. The room waited. Finally, Jungkook exhaled slowly. "It was 2 months before debut evaluations," he began. His voice was quiet, but every word felt heavy. "There were rumors that only 2 vocalists would make the final lineup." Taehyung frowned, "But we debuted with 4. "Yeah," Jungkook said, "but we didn't know that back then." The memory dragged him backward. Back to that cramped practice room that smelled like dust and old speakers. 3 teenagers sitting on the floor. Minseok had been packing. "You both know what this means," he had said. Jimin looked confused. "What do you mean?" "There are only 2 spots," Minseok said bluntly, "and there are 3 of us." Jungkook remembered the uncomfortable silence that followed. Then Minseok laughed lightly. "Well, I guess we'll see who the company chooses." But something about the way he said it had felt wrong. Jungkook returned to the present. "He started acting differently after that," Jungkook said. Namjoon folded his arms. "How?" "He began sabotaging practice sessions," Jungkook said quietly. The others looked surprised. Jin raised an eyebrow. "Sabotaging?" Jimin spoke this time. "He would hide equipment," Jimin said, "delete recordings, spread rumors about us to other trainees." Taehyung's jaw dropped. "You're serious?" Jungkook nodded. "At first we thought we were imagining it." Yoongi shook his head slowly. "Classic trainee politics." Jungkook continued. "Then one night we caught him." The room grew silent again. Hosok leaned forward. "Caught him doing what?" Jungkook swallowed. "He tried to erase the recording of our song." The words hung in the air. Taehyung blinked. Wait, the trainee song. Jimin nodded slowly. He said if none of us had the song, it wouldn't matter who debuted. Namjoon looked stunned. That's insane. Jungkook nodded faintly. We argued. The memory surged forward again. Minseok standing by the computer. Jimin shouting. Jungkook trying to pull them apart. And the words Minseok had yelled before storming out. If I don't debut, neither of you deserve it. Jungkook rubbed his face tiredly. 2 weeks later, he was gone. Jin frowned. Gone how? The company terminated his contract, Jimin said. Why? Taehyung asked. Jungkook hesitated. Because this part had always haunted him. Because they found out he had leaked internal trainee footage online, Jungkook said quietly. The room went still. Yoongi exhaled slowly. So he broke the contract. Jungkook nodded. But his expression was troubled. Namjoon noticed. What aren't you saying? Jungkook looked at the floor. He blamed us, he admitted. Taehyung scoffed. Of course he did. He told people we reported him. Jimin finally leaned back in his chair. We didn't. The manager sighed deeply. But now he's back, he said. As if on cue, another staff member ran into the room. You need to see this. The laptop opened again. The news broadcast had continued. But now the interviewer looked excited. Minseok, she said, we just received a message from someone claiming to have proof. Everyone in the room stiffened. What kind of proof? She asked. Minseok smiled slowly. A recording. Jungkook's heart stopped. The interviewer blinked. A recording of what? Minseok leaned closer to the camera. Of the night the song was written. The room erupted with voices. What? That's impossible. He doesn't have that. Jungkook's pulse thundered in his ears. Because if Minseok really had that recording, then people would hear everything. Not just the song, but the argument, the accusations, and the moment Jungkook had said something he regretted for the rest of his life. On the screen, Minseok's smile widened. I think fans deserve to know the truth, he said calmly. And Jungkook realized with chilling clarity that the past they thought was buried had only just begun to surface. The moment Minseok said the word recording, the air in the room changed. It felt heavier, like something invisible had just pressed down on everyone's chest. Jungkook stared at the laptop screen as if it might explode. That's impossible, he said again, quieter this time. Jimin didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on Minseok's face on the broadcast, studying every micro-expression like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Namjoon spoke first. What recording is he talking about? No one answered. The interviewer on the broadcast leaned forward, her voice full of excitement that only reporters chasing a scandal could have. You're saying you have an audio recording from the trainee days. Minseok folded his hands calmly. Yes. From the night the song was written. Yes. Taehyung muttered under his breath, this guy really wants attention. But Jungkook's stomach twisted harder. Because there had been a recording that night. A cheap phone lying on the practice room floor while they worked on the melody. Jimin had placed it there to remember the tune. Jungkook suddenly looked at him. Didn't we delete that file? Jimin slowly turned his head. I thought we did. The two of them locked eyes. A memory surfaced at the same moment for both of them. Minseok picking up the phone after the argument. The way he had slipped it into his pocket while shouting. Jimin's voice dropped. He took it. The manager ran a hand through his hair. If that recording gets released, Yoongi finished the sentence flatly. It becomes a scandal. Hosok frowned. Why, it's just trainees arguing. Jungkook laughed weakly. You didn't hear what I said that night. Everyone looked at him. Taehyung tilted his head. What did you say? Jungkook didn't answer. Instead, he turned back to the laptop. The interviewer was still speaking. Do you plan to release the recording? Minseok smiled like someone savoring a slow victory. I think people deserve context. The interviewer's eyes widened. So you will release it? Maybe, Minseok said, if certain people continue pretending nothing happened. Jungkook felt heat rising in his chest. Pretending, he muttered. Jimin placed a hand lightly on his arm. Don't react yet. But Jungkook's patience was already cracking. That guy is acting like we ruined his life. Yoongi raised an eyebrow. Did you? No. The word came out louder than Jungkook intended. Silence followed. Jimin's voice was calm. You didn't. But Jungkook shook his head. I said something unforgivable. Namjoon watched him carefully. What was it? Jungkook hesitated. Then the memory hit him fully. The practice room that night had been filled with shouting. Minseok's voice echoing off the mirrors. You think the company chose you because you're better. Jungkook had been exhausted, scared, and angry. Maybe they did, he snapped. Minseok laughed harshly. No, he said, they chose you because you're younger, you're easier to market. Jimin tried to calm them down. Stop this, we're supposed to be friends. But Minseok wasn't listening. If one of us disappears tomorrow, nobody will care, he said bitterly. That was when Jungkook lost his temper. Then maybe you should disappear first. The words had come out sharp and cruel. Even Jungkook hadn't meant them. But they hung in the air like broken glass. Minseok's expression had changed instantly. You really think that? He asked quietly. Jungkook had tried to backtrack. I didn't mean. But Minseok had already grabbed the phone and stormed out. The memory ended. Back in the present, Jungkook covered his face with his hands. I told him to disappear, he said hoarsely. The room went silent. Hosok blinked. You didn't mean it like that. I know, Jungkook said. But if that recording exists, Jin muttered. People will hear exactly that sentence, Yoongi finished. Taehyung groaned. Oh great, the internet will love that. The manager looked pale. If that clip gets out of context. Namjoon nodded slowly. It could look like bullying. Jungkook's chest tightened. That's exactly what Minseok wants. Jimin suddenly stood up. Everyone looked at him. His expression had changed. It wasn't calm anymore. It was sharp. Focused. He won't release it, Jimin said. The manager frowned. How can you be sure? Jimin's voice was steady. Because if he releases the full recording, it reveals something else. Jungkook looked up. What do you mean? Jimin met his eyes. The part where he threatens us. The room froze. Taehyung blinked. Threatens you. Jimin nodded. He said if he didn't debut, he'd destroy the team before it started. Namjoon's eyes narrowed. You never told us that. Jimin shrugged slightly. It didn't matter anymore once he left. Yoongi leaned forward. But if the recording includes that, then releasing it exposes him too, Hosok finished. Jimin nodded. That's why he's being vague. Jungkook exhaled slowly. So he's bluffing. Partially, Jimin said. But he still has enough audio to create chaos. As if summoned by the tension in the room, Jungkook's phone suddenly buzzed violently on the table. Everyone looked down. It was a notification flood. Hundreds of messages. Thousands of mentions. Taehyung peeked over his shoulder. Oh wow. Jungkook picked up the phone. His heart dropped. A new video had just been posted online. The title read, Leaked Audio from BTS Trainee Days. Jungkook's fingers trembled as he tapped it. The audio crackled through the phone speaker. The sound of a practice room. Young voices. Laughter. Jimin humming the melody. Then Jungkook's younger voice saying softly, "This song is ours." The room went very still. Then Minseok's voice appeared in the recording. "Three of us." Jungkook's stomach twisted. The recording jumped forward. Suddenly, the argument started. Shouting. Accusations. And then the worst moment. Jungkook's younger voice cutting through the noise. "Then maybe you should disappear first." The audio stopped there. Cut abruptly. Edited. Incomplete. Taehyung whispered, "Oh no." The manager looked like he might faint. "That clip will spread everywhere." Yoongi cursed quietly. Jungkook felt cold all over. Because Minseok had done exactly what they feared. He had released only the worst part. The most damaging sentence. Without the rest of the story. Jungkook dropped into the chair slowly. "It's over," he whispered. But Jimin was already picking up his own phone. His eyes burned with determination. "No," he said. Jungkook looked at him. Jimin's voice was calm, but something fierce was rising beneath it. "If he wants the truth out there." He looked directly at Jungkook. "Then we'll give the whole truth." Outside the room, notifications kept exploding across the internet like fireworks. The past was no longer buried. And this time, it wasn't going back into the dark. The room was filled with the sound of phones vibrating. Notifications stacked faster than anyone could read them. Every few seconds another alert chimed, another headline appeared, another video clip spread across the internet like wildfire. Jungkook stared at his screen as the leaked audio kept replaying. "Then maybe you should disappear first." His own voice sounded colder than he remembered. It echoed inside his head like a verdict. Taehyung groaned and leaned back in his chair. "Yeah, the internet is definitely not going to interpret that kindly." Hosok looked worried. "How fast is it spreading?" Yoongi answered without even looking up from his phone. "Too fast." Namjoon exhaled slowly. "What are people saying?" Yoongi turned the screen around. The comments were brutal. "This is BULLYNG. JUNGKOOK told HIM to disappear. What really HAPPNED back then? Release the full audio." Jin rubbed his temples. "This is going to explode." The manager looked like he was agging 10 years in real time. "The company will issue a statement," he said quickly. Jimin shook his head. "No." Everyone turned to him. The calmness in his voice was unsettling. Namjoon narrowed his eyes slightly. "What are you thinking?" Jimin crossed his arms. "We speak first." The manager immediately protested. "That's not how this works." Jimin's gaze didn't waver. "It is today." The tension in the room thickened. Jungkook watched him carefully. Jimin wasn't angry. He was something far more dangerous. Determined. The manager stood up. The company will handle this. You shouldn't respond emotionally right now. Jimin's voice remained quiet. I'm not emotional. Taehyung muttered, that's debatable. Jimin ignored him. Minseok wants attention, Jimin continued. He released that clip to control the story. Namjoon nodded slowly. That's true. So we take the control back, Jimin said. The manager frowned. And how exactly do you plan to do that? Jimin turned to Jungkook. Tell them everything. Jungkook blinked. Everything. Yes. Yoongi tilted his head. You're talking about the full story. Jimin nodded. The manager immediately shook his head. That's risky. Jimin's voice hardened slightly. Not as risky as letting him define what happened. Silence settled over the room again. Jungkook felt everyone's eyes on him. His chest tightened. Because the truth wasn't simple. It wasn't clean. And it definitely wasn't flattering. Taehyung spoke carefully. Are we sure the whole story helps? Jungkook laughed quietly. It makes me look worse before it gets better. Namjoon leaned forward. But the ending matters. Jungkook rubbed his face. The internet doesn't always wait for the ending. Hoseok sighed. That's unfortunately true. Meanwhile, the chaos online kept growing. A staff member rushed in again, breathless. It's trending worldwide now. Yoongi didn't look surprised. What number? Number 1. The room went quiet again. The staff member hesitated before adding something else. And Minseok just posted another message. Jimin's eyes narrowed. What did he say? The staff member showed the screen. A simple post. Short. Provocative. Funny how people change after fame. Taehyung scoffed. Oh, this guy loves drama. Jungkook clenched his jaw. He wants a reaction. Jimin spoke calmly. He's going to get one. The manager sighed. If you respond publicly right now, every word will be analyzed. Yoongi shrugged. That happens anyway. Jin leaned forward. There's another problem. Everyone looked at him. What? Jin pointed at Jungkook's phone. Look at the fan theories. Jungkook scrolled reluctantly. And immediately regretted it. People were dissecting every frame of the leaked audio. Analyzing tone, timing, background noises. Some fans defended him. Others were furious. But one theory was gaining traction. Taehyung read it out loud slowly. They think the fight was about jealousy. Jungkook frowned. What? Hoseok leaned closer. Jealousy between who? Taehyung looked up. You and Jimin. The room went silent again. Jungkook blinked in disbelief. That's ridiculous. Yoongi shrugged. The internet loves drama. Namjoon rubbed his chin thoughtfully. That theory probably comes from how close you two were. Taehyung smirked slightly. And how intense that stage moment looked. Jungkook groaned. Great, now it's a love triangle scandal. Jimin actually laughed softly. The sound surprised everyone. Jin looked at him. You're laughing. Jimin shrugged. They're not completely wrong. The room froze. Taehyung's mouth fell open. Wait, what? Jungkook stared at him. Jimin. Jimin's expression remained relaxed. What? Namjoon looked intrigued. You're saying jealousy was involved. Jimin met Jungkook's eyes calmly. There was tension. Jungkook felt heat rise to his face. Don't say it like that. Yoongi raised an eyebrow. Say what exactly? Jimin tilted his head. You were jealous. Jungkook choked on air. I was not. Taehyung burst out laughing. Oh, this just got interesting. Jimin looked completely serious. You were. Jungkook shook his head furiously. That's not true. Jimin raised an eyebrow. Really? Namjoon leaned back, clearly curious now. Explain. Jungkook looked betrayed. You're all enjoying this way too much. Yoongi smirked slightly. Continue. Jimin spoke gently but clearly. Back then, Minseok was very popular with the trainers. Jungkook frowned. So, he got praise constantly, Jimin continued, and you hated it. Jungkook groaned. That's not jealousy. Taehyung grinned. That sounds exactly like jealousy. Jungkook glared at him. I was competitive. Same thing, Yoongi said calmly. Jimin's voice softened slightly. You were scared. Jungkook stopped talking. The room grew quiet again. Because that part was true. Jimin continued carefully. You thought Minseok might replace you. Jungkook's shoulders dropped. I was 15, he muttered. Jimin nodded. I know. Namjoon looked thoughtful. So the fight that night was about fear, Jimin finished. Jungkook exhaled slowly. Yes. The manager checked his phone again. The situation online is escalating. Jimin stood up. Then it's time. The manager looked wary. Time for what? Jimin looked around the room. For the full story. Jungkook stared at him. You're really doing this? Jimin nodded. We should have done it 10 years ago. Jungkook hesitated. Then his phone buzzed again. A new notification appeared. Another post from Minseok. This one included a single sentence. Maybe I should release the rest of the recording. The room felt suddenly smaller. Jimin read the message. Then he smiled slightly. Not a warm smile. A dangerous one. Perfect timing, he said quietly. Jungkook felt a strange mix of dread and relief. Because for the first time since this chaos started, Jimin looked completely ready for war. And this time, they weren't hiding anything anymore. The room felt like a pressure chamber. Every phone screen glowed in the dim light, showing the same storm of notifications. Headlines multiplied by the second, fan debates spiraled into chaos, and the single leaked sentence continued to echo across every corner of the internet. Then maybe you should disappear first. Jungkook felt as if that one line had grown teeth. It was chewing through 10 years of silence. Jimin stood by the table, scrolling slowly through the latest posts. His expression was unreadable, but the longer he looked at the screen, the more his jaw tightened. Taehyung broke the silence first. Okay, he said carefully, we need a strategy. Yoongi leaned back against the wall. We already have one. Taehyung looked confused. We do. Yoongi nodded toward Jimin. He's about to blow everything open. The manager sighed deeply. Which is exactly what the company wants to avoid. Jimin finally spoke again. The company wants control. That's normal, the manager replied quickly. But the truth doesn't belong to them, Jimin said quietly. Namjoon watched him closely. You're serious about telling everything? Yes. Namjoon nodded slowly. Then we need to do it properly. Jin folded his arms. And quickly. Because outside that room, the narrative was already mutating. Jungkook refreshed his feed again. A new video had appeared. Someone had slowed the leaked audio and added dramatic subtitles. The argument sounded even harsher now. The comments were exploding. He sounds so cruel. Poor Minkook. This changes everything. Jungkook locked his phone. I hate this. Hoseok spoke gently. It's not the whole story. But it's the part people heard, Jungkook replied. The door suddenly opened. Two senior company executives entered. Their expressions were stiff. The manager straightened immediately. So, the older executive looked around the room. I assume everyone has seen the situation. No one answered. The man continued. The company will release an official statement in 1 hour. Jimin's voice cut through the room. No. The executive turned slowly. Excuse me. Jimin met his gaze directly. We speak first. The executive frowned. That is not how crisis management works. Jimin didn't move. That clip is incomplete. We know, the executive replied, which is why we will deny the accusations. That won't work, Jimin said. The executive's patience began to thin. And why not? Jimin pointed toward Jungkook's phone. Because people already believe it. The executive looked irritated. Public opinion shifts quickly. Yoongi spoke quietly from the corner. Not when there's audio. Namjoon added calmly, denial without explanation will make it worse. The executive looked between them. So your solution is to expose trainee conflicts from a decade ago. Yes, Jimin said. That could damage the company's image. Jimin's voice remained calm. The truth already exists. The executive sighed. You're under contract. Jimin nodded. I know. Then you understand that public statements must be approved. Jimin didn't respond. Instead, he reached for Jungkook's phone. Jungkook blinked. What are you doing? Jimin unlocked the screen. I'm checking something. The room watched as he scrolled. His eyes suddenly sharpened. There it is. Namjoon stepped closer. What? Jimin turned the phone around. It was another post from Minkook. But this time, it included a short video. A new audio clip. Jungkook's stomach dropped. The room went silent as the sound played. Young voices again. The practice room echo. Minkook's voice shouting. You two think you're better than me. Then Jungkook's voice. That's not what we said. The audio crackled. Jimin's younger voice tried to calm them down. Stop fighting. Then Minkook again. If I don't debut, I swear I'll ruin both of you. The clip ended abruptly. Taehyung whispered, oh. Hoseok stared at the screen. He just exposed himself. Yoongi smirked faintly. Not intentionally. Namjoon nodded slowly. That threat changes everything. The executive leaned forward. Where did he post this? His own account, Jimin said. The executive's eyes widened slightly. That was a mistake. Jimin looked almost amused. He's angry. Jungkook exhaled slowly. He's losing control. But the situation was far from calm. Because the internet was now splitting into two camps. Some people were defending Jungkook. Others believed Minkook had been provoked. The arguments were escalating. Taehyung glanced at the comments again. Oh wow. What now? Jin asked. They're asking why we never told this story before. Namjoon answered quietly. Because we wanted to move forward. The executive crossed his arms. This situation is now complicated. Jimin corrected him softly. No. The executive raised an eyebrow. It's clear. Everyone looked at him. Jimin spoke slowly. The full recording will show everything. Jungkook's chest tightened. That recording also includes my worst moment. Jimin looked at him. You were 15. That doesn't erase the words. No, Jimin said. But it explains them. The executive was still hesitant. If the full audio surfaces, the media will analyze every detail. Yoongi shrugged. They already are. Namjoon nodded. The difference is context. The executive sighed heavily. You're asking to gamble the company's reputation. Jimin shook his head. No. He looked toward Jungkook again. We are protecting a friend. Jungkook blinked. Me. Jimin's expression softened. You've been carrying guilt for 10 years. The room grew quiet. Jungkook swallowed. You carried it too. Jimin shrugged. That's what friends do. Taehyung grinned faintly. This is getting emotional. Yoongi nudged him. Shut up. Jimin looked back at the executive. We release the full recording. The executive hesitated. Before he could answer, Jungkook's phone buzzed again. Another message. From an unknown number. Jungkook opened it slowly. A single audio file appeared. Below it was a short text. You want the full truth. The sender name made Jungkook's blood run cold. Minkook. Everyone leaned closer. Jungkook pressed play. The audio began. But this time, the recording continued past the argument. Past the threats. Past the shouting. And into a moment no one in that room had heard before. Minkook's voice was quieter now. Almost bitter. You know why the company chose you, Jungkook. Young Jungkook answered defensively. No. Minkook laughed softly. Because Jimin asked them to. The room went completely still. Jungkook slowly lifted his head and turned toward Jimin. Because that was a truth he had never heard before. The recording ended with a faint crackle. For several seconds, nobody in the room moved. It felt as if the air had suddenly been sucked out of the walls. Jungkook was still staring at the phone in his hand. Because the sentence he had just heard didn't make sense. Not logically. Not emotionally. Not historically. Minkook's voice echoed again in his mind. Because Jimin asked them to. Slowly, Jungkook lifted his head. Jimin was standing across the room, very still, his arms folded loosely as if nothing unusual had just happened. But Jungkook knew him too well. The tension in Jimin's shoulders was unmistakable. You asked them what? Jungkook said quietly. No one else spoke. The executives, the members, even the staff seemed frozen between curiosity and dread. Jimin inhaled slowly before answering. I asked them to reconsider the evaluation. The room reacted instantly. Taehyung blinked, wait. Jin frowned, reconsider what evaluation? Jimin didn't look away from Jungkook. The vocal lineup. Jungkook felt something twist painfully in his chest. What do you mean? Jimin hesitated. Namjoon stepped forward slightly. Jimin. Jimin's voice was steady when he spoke again. 2 weeks before the final trainee evaluation, the trainers had already decided something. The room leaned closer. What? Hosok asked. Jimin swallowed once. They planned to remove Jungkook. The words landed like a thunderclap. Jungkook blinked. For a moment, he thought he had misheard. That's not possible. Jimin shook his head slowly. It is. The executive looked alarmed. Those internal discussions were confidential. Yoongi gave him a dry look. That ship sailed the moment Minseok leaked audio. The executive fell silent. Jungkook stared at Jimin. They were going to cut me. Jimin nodded. They thought you were too young. Jungkook let out a weak laugh. That's ridiculous. They believed you weren't emotionally stable enough for debut, Jimin continued. The room was completely silent now. Jungkook's voice dropped. And you knew this? Yes. When? 3 days before the final evaluation. Jungkook's hands trembled slightly. And you didn't tell me. Jimin's expression softened. You were already under too much pressure. Jungkook shook his head slowly. So instead you. He gestured vaguely toward the phone. Ask them to change their minds. Jimin nodded. Taehyung whispered, this is insane. Namjoon looked deeply thoughtful. What exactly did you say to them? Jimin leaned against the table, remembering. I told them they were making a mistake. Jin blinked. You argued with the trainers. Yes. The executive sighed heavily. That meeting was not meant for trainees. Jimin shrugged. I went anyway. Hosok stared at him. By yourself. Jimin nodded. Yoongi raised an eyebrow. Bold move. Jimin's voice remained calm. I told them if they removed Jungkook, they would lose the strongest vocalist in the company. Jungkook felt his chest tighten. Why would you say that? Jimin looked at him as if the answer was obvious. Because it was true. Jungkook didn't know what to say. He searched his memory desperately. But he had never known about this. Not once in 10 years. Taehyung leaned forward. So Minseok heard about this. Jimin nodded. He overheard one of the trainers talking about the meeting. Yoongi crossed his arms. And he assumed you manipulated the result. Exactly. Jungkook looked stunned. So when he accused me that night, he believed the company chose you because of me, Jimin finished. The room fell quiet again. Jungkook ran both hands through his hair. This is insane. Namjoon spoke carefully. It explains a lot. Jungkook turned to him. How? Namjoon gestured toward the phone. Minseok believed he lost his spot because you were protected. Jin added quietly, which means he carried resentment for 10 years. Jungkook exhaled slowly. All because of something I didn't even know happened. Jimin looked slightly uncomfortable. I never told you because it didn't matter anymore. Jungkook laughed softly. It mattered to him. Jimin nodded. Yes. The executive checked his phone again. This revelation complicates things further. Taehyung frowned. How? The executive showed the screen. Another post from Minseok had appeared. It included a caption. See, even the recording proves favoritism. Yoongi groaned. This guy never stops. Hosok rubbed his face. He's twisting the narrative again. Jungkook stared at the message. So now I'm the kid who stole someone else's dream. Namjoon spoke firmly. That's not what happened. Jungkook didn't respond. Because part of him suddenly wondered. If Jimin hadn't spoken to the trainers, would he have debuted? The thought made his stomach churn. Jimin noticed the change in Jungkook's expression immediately. "Don't even think that," he said sharply. Jungkook looked up. "Think what?" "That you didn't deserve to debut." Jungkook forced a small smile. "You don't know what I'm thinking." "I do," Jimin said quietly. The room sensed the tension rising again. Taehyung whispered to Jin, "Here we go." Jungkook looked directly at Jimin. "You interfered with the evaluation." Jimin's eyes hardened slightly. "I defended you." "That's not the same thing." Jimin's voice sharpened. "You were 15. So what?" "You were exhausted, homesick, and barely sleeping." "I was still competing," Jungkook replied. "And you were still better than everyone else," Jimin said. Jungkook shook his head. "You can't know that." "I watched you practice until 3 in the morning every day," Jimin replied. The room was dead quiet now. "You pushed yourself harder than anyone," Jimin continued. "And you think that didn't matter?" Jungkook didn't answer. Jimin stepped closer. "You earned your debut." Jungkook's voice was softer now. "But you still had to fight for me." Jimin shrugged slightly. "That's what teammates do." Yoongi muttered quietly, "He's not wrong." But Jungkook was still struggling with the revelation. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Jimin smiled faintly. "Because I knew you'd react exactly like this." Jungkook exhaled slowly. "Maybe you should have trusted me." Jimin's expression softened again. "Maybe." Another phone buzz interrupted the moment. This time it was Namjoon's. He checked the notification. Then he sighed. "What now?" Taehyung asked. Namjoon turned the screen around. Minseok had posted again. But this time, the message was different. Jod. Job. And clearly aimed at Jimin. "Hero complex doesn't change the truth." Jungkook looked at Jimin. Jimin stared at the message calmly. Then he chuckled quietly. Taehyung blinked. "You're laughing again." Jimin nodded. "Because he just made a mistake." Yoongi raised an eyebrow. "What mistake?" Jimin looked around the room. He confirmed the one thing we needed. Namjoon's eyes lit with realization. "The motive." Jimin nodded. "He's not exposing the past." Jungkook frowned. "Then what is he doing?" Jimin's gaze darkened slightly. "He's trying to start a war." The room went silent again. Jungkook looked at the phone. At Minseok's last message. And for the first time that night, he felt something shift inside him. The guilt that had weighed on him for 10 years began slowly transforming into something else. Resolve. Because if Minseok wanted the full truth to come out, then Jungkook was finally ready to face it too. The silence in the room was no longer fragile. It had turned heavy, electric, like the moment before a storm breaks open. Jungkook sat with both hands resting on the table, staring at Minseok's last post glowing on the screen. The words were short, almost casual, but the intention behind them was sharp. Hero complex doesn't change the truth. For years Jungkook had carried guilt, confusion, and the dull ache of a fight that ended a friendship before any of them understood what adulthood would look like. But now, the story was unraveling in public, twisted, and rearranged by someone who clearly wanted more than closure. Namjoon was the first to break the quiet. "He's escalating," he said calmly. Yoongi leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. "No," he said, "he's provoking." Taehyung looked between them. "What's the difference?" Yoongi smirked faintly. "Escalation means you're reacting to something. Provocation means you're trying to force someone else to react. Hosok nodded slowly. So he wants us to lose control. Jimin's voice was quiet. He wants Jungkook to respond emotionally. Jungkook finally looked up. Well, he's getting close. Jin studied him carefully. You okay? Jungkook let out a slow breath. No. There was honesty in that answer that made the room grow quiet again. For the first time since the scandal began, Jungkook felt the anger rising clearly inside his chest. Not the confused panic from earlier, but something sharper. Minseok had taken a private moment from their teenage years and turned it into a spectacle. But worse than that, he had twisted the story until even the truth felt suspicious. Namjoon watched Jungkook carefully. What are you thinking right now? Jungkook rubbed his forehead. I'm thinking we should talk to him directly. The room reacted instantly. Taehyung blinked. You mean call him? Yes. The executive immediately shook his head. That is absolutely not advisable. Yoongi looked intrigued. Actually, it might be. The executive stared at him. You cannot be serious. Yoongi shrugged. If he wants attention, he'll answer. Hosok frowned slightly. But what does that solve? Jungkook answered quietly. It tells us what he really wants. Jimin's gaze lingered on Jungkook. You're sure you want to do that? Yes. Even if he says things you don't want to hear. Jungkook laughed softly. He already has. The room considered it. Namjoon finally nodded. One call, he said, but we record everything. The executive looked horrified. This is not a negotiation with a rival company. This is a public scandal. Namjoon met his eyes calmly. And the public is already watching. For a long moment, the executive said nothing. Then he sighed. Fine. Jungkook picked up his phone again. The unknown number that had sent the recording was still on the screen. His thumb hovered over it. The room felt suddenly smaller. You ready? Taehyung asked quietly. Jungkook exhaled. No. Then he pressed the call button. The phone rang once. Twice. 3 times. Then someone answered. The voice on the other end was instantly recognizable. Minseok. Well, he said calmly, I was wondering when you'd called. The room remained completely silent as Jungkook placed the phone on speaker. Jungkook spoke first. Why are you doing this? Minseok laughed softly. That's your opening line. It's the only one that matters. Minseok seemed amused. You really don't understand. Jungkook's voice hardened. No. Minseok exhaled slowly. 10 years ago, I lost everything. Yoongi muttered quietly under his breath. You lost it yourself. Minseok's voice sharpened slightly. I can hear you, by the way. Yoongi didn't sound apologetic. Good. Jungkook interrupted before the argument spiraled. You broke the trainee contract. Minseok scoffed. Is that what they told you? Jungkook frowned. What does that mean? Minseok's tone shifted slightly, becoming colder. It means the company needed someone to blame. The room exchanged uneasy glances. Namjoon leaned closer to the phone. What exactly are you saying? Minseok chuckled quietly. You all really believed that story, didn't you? Jimin's voice cut in. Minseok. The name alone changed the atmosphere. For the first time since the call began, Minseok went silent for a moment. When he spoke again, the bitterness in his voice was clearer. You finally decided to talk. Jimin remained calm. You're hurting a lot of people. Minseok laughed again. Interesting, coming from you. Jimin didn't react. What do you want? Jungkook asked. Minseok paused. Then he answered in a way that made the room colder. The truth. Jin frowned. You're releasing edited clips. I released proof, Minseok replied. Yoongi shook his head. You released the worst 10 seconds. Minseok's tone grew sharper. Because that's the part people need to hear. Jungkook leaned forward. No. His voice was stronger now. That's the part you wanted them to hear. Silence stretched across the line. Then Minseok spoke again, quieter this time. You told me to disappear. Jungkook closed his eyes briefly. I know. You meant it. No. Minseok scoffed. You were always bad at lying. Jungkook's voice was steady. I was angry. Minseok didn't respond immediately. Then he said something unexpected. I was jealous. The confession hung in the air. Even Yoongi looked slightly surprised. Jungkook blinked. What? Minseok exhaled. You had something none of us did. Jungkook frowned. What are you talking about? Minseok's voice softened slightly. People believed in you. Jungkook glanced unconsciously at Jimin. Minseok continued. Trainers, producers, even the other trainees. Taehyung whispered quietly, that's not entirely wrong. Minseok's tone turned bitter again. And Jimin. The room stilled again. Jimin didn't speak. Minseok continued. You defended him like he was your responsibility. Jimin finally responded. He was my teammate. No, Minseok said quietly, he was your favorite. Taehyung muttered under his breath, okay, now this is getting messy. Jungkook felt tension rising again. That has nothing to do with why you're doing this. Minseok laughed quietly. It has everything to do with it. Jungkook clenched his jaw. You're destroying our reputations. Minseok replied calmly. You destroyed my future first. Namjoon spoke carefully. We didn't. Minseok's voice hardened. You stayed silent when the company blamed me. No one answered immediately. Because that part was true. Jungkook swallowed. We were trainees, he said quietly. We were scared. Minseok didn't reply for several seconds. Then he said something that changed the tone completely. You want the full truth. Jungkook's heart beat faster. Yes. Minseok sighed softly. Then ask your company why they really removed me. The room froze. Jungkook slowly looked toward the executives. Minseok's voice returned, colder than before. Because the reason they gave you was a lie. The room felt as if it had been sealed shut. No one breathed. Minseok's last sentence echoed through the phone speaker, heavy and unsettling. Because the reason they gave you was a lie. Jungkook slowly lifted his head and looked toward the executives standing near the door. The tension on their faces was unmistakable now. Whatever Minseok was implying, it had struck a nerve. Jungkook's voice was quiet but firm. What lie? On the phone, Minseok chuckled faintly. You really don't know. The executive closest to the door stepped forward quickly. This conversation has gone far enough. But Jungkook didn't look at him. His eyes stayed fixed on the phone. Answer the question. Minseok took a slow breath. Fine. There was a short pause, long enough for the entire room to feel the weight of what was coming next. I wasn't removed because of the leaked footage. Jin frowned. Then why? Minseok's voice lowered. Because I got into a fight with one of the trainers. The room exchanged confused glances. Jungkook frowned. That's normal. Trainees argue with trainers all the time. Minseok laughed. Yes, but trainees don't usually punch them. The words hit the room like a stone dropped into water. Taehyung's eyes widened. You what? Yoongi muttered under his breath. Well, that explains a lot. Minseok continued. It happened 3 days after our argument. Jungkook's mind raced, trying to remember. But no one had told them that story back then. Jungkook spoke slowly. You attacked a trainer. Minseok didn't deny it. He insulted my family. Jimin's voice softened slightly. And you lost control. Yes. There was no pride in Minseok's voice. Just something tired. I knew my contract was finished the moment it happened. The executive in the room finally spoke again, clearly uncomfortable. That matter was handled internally. Minseok laughed quietly. Of course it was. Jungkook leaned forward. Then why blame the leaked footage? Because the company needed a cleaner story, Minseok replied. Silence filled the room again. Namjoon spoke thoughtfully. So you weren't expelled for betrayal? No, Minseok said. I was expelled because I made a stupid mistake. The anger that had fueled the entire scandal suddenly seemed smaller. More human. More tragic. Jungkook rubbed his forehead slowly. So you destroyed our reputations because you thought we ruined your life. Minseok answered honestly. Yes. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Jimin broke the silence. You ruined it yourself. Minseok didn't argue. I know. His voice sounded different now. Quieter. Less sharp. Taehyung looked confused. Then why start all this now? Minseok sighed. Because hearing that song again brought everything back. The room softened slightly. Minseok continued. That night in the practice room, we were just kids. Jungkook nodded slowly. Yes. Minseok laughed faintly. 3 stupid teenagers arguing about a future none of us understood. Yoongi smirked slightly. That part hasn't changed much. Minseok didn't respond to the joke. Instead, he said something that surprised everyone. I never hated the song. Jungkook blinked. You tried to delete it. I was angry, Minseok replied. Jimin spoke quietly. But you kept the recording. Yes. Why? Minseok took a long breath before answering. Because it was the last night we were friends. The room fell silent again. Jungkook felt the anger slowly draining out of him, replaced by something heavier. Regret. We were never enemies, Jungkook said quietly. Minseok gave a tired laugh. Maybe not, but I spent 10 years acting like we were. Another pause followed. Then Jungkook asked the question that had been lingering since the call began. What do you want now? Minseok didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded calmer than before. I already posted the full recording. Everyone in the room looked at their phones at the same time. The notification appeared instantly. A new video. Unedited. The entire conversation from that night. The argument. The threat. Jungkook's cruel sentence. And the part where Minseok admitted his fear. The part where Jimin tried to stop the fight. The part where 3 exhausted trainees sounded more scared than angry. Namjoon watched the clip silently. Then he nodded. This tells the whole story. Minseok spoke again through the phone. Now people can decide for themselves. Jungkook exhaled slowly. You could have done this from the beginning. Yes, Minseok said. But I needed to hear something first. What? Minseok answered quietly. That you didn't mean it. Jungkook didn't hesitate. I didn't. The line went silent for several seconds. Then Minseok said something none of them expected. Good. There was a small click. The call ended. The room remained quiet for a long time. Outside the building, the internet continued exploding with reactions as people watched the full recording. But the tone was changing now. Understanding was slowly replacing outrage. Taehyung leaned back and sighed dramatically. Well, Hosok looked relieved. That ended better than I expected. Yoongi nodded slightly. Truth usually does. Jungkook sat there for a moment longer, staring at the dark phone screen. 10 years of confusion had unraveled in one long conversation. Jimin stepped closer. You okay? Jungkook looked up. Yes. Jimin smiled softly. Good. Jungkook hesitated before speaking again. Why didn't you ever tell me you fought the trainers for me? Jimin shrugged lightly. You would have been embarrassed. Jungkook laughed quietly. I still am. Taehyung suddenly grinned. So does this mean the legendary Trainee song is officially public now? Yoongi smirked. Looks like it. Namjoon looked thoughtful. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Jin nodded. Fans already love it. Jungkook glanced at Jimin. Then I guess our promise finally came true. Jimin tilted his head slightly. Which one? Jungkook smiled. The one we made in that practice room. Jimin laughed softly. To sing it on a real stage. Outside the window, the city lights shimmered in the distance. 10 years earlier, 3 trainees had dreamed about standing on a stage together, uncertain if any of them would make it. Life hadn't turned out the way they imagined. But the song survived. And sometimes that was enough.